If you're hearing this, it's time to let the day go. You've made it to a quiet place. A place where nothing moves too quickly and nothing loud is allowed in. Over the next 2 hours, you won't be asked to learn anything or remember anything. You're just here to listen. Breathe slowly and let the stillness of the past carry you toward rest. Tonight, we're stepping into the slow, silent world of a scholar in Tang Dynasty, China. There are no wars to win, no great speeches, no emperors in golden robes. Just a man, his inkstone, his brush, and the quiet rhythm of a life built around repetition, study, and silence. You'll hear the wind against rice paper walls, the scrape of ink being ground on stone, the sound of a page drying by morning light. Nothing urgent, nothing sharp, just the texture of a life lived deliberately and slowly. So settle into your bed, let your jaw unclench, let your breath fall lower into your chest. And if stories like this help you sleep, consider subscribing so you'll always have a quiet place to return to. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. It's oddly satisfying to see who else is falling asleep to the past. Let's begin. It's still dark in Luoyang. The sky is a deep silken blue, not yet pierced by dawn. In a modest home nestled among tiled rooftops and narrow alleyways, a scholar lies awake. He's not restless, just waiting. This is the soft space between sleep and morning. And in this house, nothing begins with noise. A rooster calls somewhere far off like a signal between worlds. The wind stirs faintly through the bamboo slats of the gate. Inside, the walls are paper-thin and still cool with the breath of night. The scholar shifts beneath his woven mat and sits up slowly. His robe is folded at his feet. He pulls it on without a word. There is no clock, no bell. Just the quiet sense, practiced and internal, that the day has arrived. His steps are soundless on the bamboo floor as he crosses to the basin. The water inside is cold. He scoops it into his hands and presses it against his face, not with urgency, but with care. The splash is soft and brief. This isn't to awaken, but to wipe away the veil of dreaming, to clear the space that will soon be filled with characters. The charcoal stove takes time. He does not rush it. He feeds it slowly, watching the embers catch and deepen. A ceramic pot is placed above it, water and a handful of dried tea leaves. They sink, twist, and begin to color the water with memory. He doesn't stir, he simply watches. In this room, watching is often enough. The room itself is spare, a scroll by the doorway with a faded poem about chrysanthemums in the wind, a single low writing table, and a wooden stand where his brushes hang in stillness. On the wall, a faint crack in the plaster resembles the path of a river. He has never fixed it. It reminds him of something. Maybe the way time moves slowly and in one direction. He pours the tea into a shallow bowl. No cup, no lid, just clay and steam. He sits by the window, legs folded beneath him, and holds the bowl in both hands. The warmth doesn't just reach his fingers. It calms something deeper, something that hums beneath the surface of the morning. The first pale light enters the room like a breath. It reveals dust in the air, the curve of a plum blossom branch leaning toward the window and the blank parchment resting on his desk. The scroll is unmarked, the inkstone is dry, but the silence is already full. He does not write yet. Writing comes only after stillness, only after the world has moved inside you. Outside, the street vendors are still asleep. The carts are still covered. Children still lie curled beside their mothers. But inside this home, something has already begun. Not work, not words. Just preparation, like the breath before the line is spoken, like the silence before the brush touches paper, and the scholar waits. Patient, present, ready. The tea is nearly gone, but the heat lingers in his hands. He sets the empty bowl aside and turns toward the inkstone, waiting patiently in the quiet corner of his desk. Beside it, the inkstick rests like a slender black bone, dense, matte, and worn smooth from years of use. This is not a moment to be rushed. To grind ink is not merely preparation, it is part of the writing itself. The act is rhythmic, physical, and strangely soothing. He picks up the inkstick and presses it gently to the stone. Then in a slow circle he begins to grind, around and around, firm and even like the steady turning of the earth. There is a sound that accompanies this motion, a soft, dry whisper like sand pulled by wind across stone. It fills the room, not loud, not harsh, just steady, gentle, reliable. He adds water a few drops at a time. Not too much, and the ink will run thin. Too little, and it will drag. The goal is balance, a pool of dark ink that shines faintly, not like oil, but like night. He grinds until his hand is warm, until the fragrance of pine smoke and soot rises faintly from the stone. This scent is familiar. It has followed him through every exam, every letter, every copied poem. It is the smell of patience. His brush is already chosen. Not the newest, not the finest, but the one that fits his hand like a memory. He checks the bristles, spreading them gently with his thumb. Still smooth, still clean. He sets it back down. There is no sense of hurry. He is not writing for anyone today. No commission, no urgent reply. Just practice, just form and flow. Perhaps he will copy a passage from the Book of Rites. Perhaps a verse from Dufu. Or maybe he will write a thought of his own, something that has been quietly taking shape over these past few mornings. A memory or a dream, or simply a sentence that pleases him. The paper lies still and unblemished, its surface soft and fibrous, waiting. It does not demand to be filled. It allows itself to wait. Outside, the neighborhood has begun to stir. A distant broom sweeps across stone. A gate creaks open and a boy's voice calls out before being hushed by a parent. But none of it intrudes. The scholar's room holds a kind of stillness that isn't easily broken. The walls may be thin, but the space within is deep. He pauses, letting his hands rest on the desk. The ink is ready, the light is soft. The room is quiet. But he does not pick up the brush just yet. Instead, he closes his eyes and breathes in through his nose as if to absorb the room itself. The faint smoke of the stove, the floral trace of the plum branch, the sharp tang of ink. All of it part of this moment. All of it worthy of attention. The act of writing begins long before the first stroke is made. It begins here with ink slowly darkening the stone and silence slowly deepening the mind. He opens his eyes, his hands move without tension. The ink pool gleams, the brush is waiting. Soon the words will come. His fingers reach for the brush, and for a moment, the room feels as still as the surface of a pond. No sudden movements, no sharp sounds. Just the soft contact of skin and wood. The brush lifts, weightless in his hand, and hovers above the ink. He dips the tip gently, watching it darken. The bristles drink the liquid like a reed pulling water from a stream. Not too much. Excess ink leads to blurred lines. The key is control, the weight of liquid, the angle of the wrist, the breath. He draws the brush back, letting the extra ink gather at the tip, and then, only then, does he lower it toward the paper. The first stroke is not a word. Not yet, it's a single line. A deliberate mark. Horizontal from left to right, light pressure fading toward the tail. It glides, like a breeze tugging a silk ribbon. Clean, quiet, and then another a vertical line, then a hook, a dot. He's not writing a sentence, and not in the way others might think. He's writing form, movement, structure. These characters, even when familiar, are fresh in the moment. They must be approached with respect. His wrist moves steadily. Each stroke begins with breath. Each character, a contained world, a balance of energy and stillness, motion and pause. The empty space around the words matters just as much as the ink itself. He leans slightly forward, posture straight but relaxed. The brush moves with him, not apart from him, as if the thoughts do not travel from mind to hand but flow straight into the bristles. The room fades into a soft blur. He does not see the window anymore, or the steam curling from the stove. He hears only the slight, almost imperceptible drag of the brush across paper, the whisper of creation. He is not thinking about the meaning of what he's writing. That comes later. For now, this is about harmony, the tilt of each stroke, the weight of each dot, the space between lines. He pauses occasionally, holding the brush in midair as if listening, not to sound but to rhythm. Is the page balanced? Is the character alive? Is the ink too heavy? Every few strokes he redips, refreshes blots lightly, begins again. The process is not mechanical, it is a living meditation, a dialogue between discipline and feeling. Somewhere far away a bell rings, not loudly, a temple bell most likely, calling monks to their morning routine. But here inside this small room, time is being measured by the flow of ink, not the clang of metal. By the darkening of a brush, not the ticking of a clock. His sleeve brushes against the edge of the desk. The scroll is halfway filled. The characters flow like reeds in a slow-moving stream, elegant, patient, slightly curved as if bowing to the page. And yet nothing about this feels finished. Writing is not an act with a clear end. Not for him. It is a condition, a state of being. He writes not to complete something, but to be in the act of writing. To exist in this specific slowness, the light has shifted. It's no longer gold but white. Day has begun. But for the scholar, it has been morning since the first stroke. He lifts the brush from the paper, letting the final stroke settle before placing it back in its stand. The characters gleam faintly, their ink still drying. He leans back slightly and exhales, not with exhaustion, but with the calm of completion. A pause, a still moment after focused motion. The scroll remains unfurled on the desk. He does not roll it up yet. To press the fibers now would smudge the words. They need time to rest just as he does. He stands slowly, letting the stiffness of stillness leave his knees. His legs tingle as blood returns to them, but he moves with grace, and not shaking, not rushed. He walks to the window where the light has grown brighter and more full. The rooftops beyond his wall shimmer faintly, still moist from last night's mist. Smoke has begun to curl from other homes. Somewhere a vendor is slicing bean curd, the sharp tap of his knife carrying faintly through the morning air. Then he hears it, a small knock, soft but deliberate. 3 even taps at the gate, not enough to startle, but enough to let him know someone waits beyond the wooden door. Visitors are rare. His life is not one that draws company, but there are always reasons to knock. A neighbor with a letter to copy, a student with a question, or a merchant bringing more parchment and ink sticks from the shop down the street. He doesn't call out. Instead, he walks quietly across the room, pulls his robe tighter at the waist, and steps into his sandals. The corridor to the gate is shaded, a narrow path with a low roof just wide enough to walk without brushing against the walls. He moves through it slowly, the cool stone beneath his feet grounding him in the moment. At the gate, he pauses and listens. A polite silence to give the visitor time to knock again, or to leave if they've changed their mind. But the presence remains, still patient. So he slides back the wooden bolt and opens the door. Outside stands a boy, no older than 10. Dust on his feet, a small satchel slung across his back. He bows deeply and holds out a folded slip of parchment. Not a letter, but a message. The scholar accepts it with both hands, nods, and steps back. The boy does not wait. He turns and disappears into the street, his figure swallowed quickly by the alley's morning haze. No words were exchanged, none were needed. Back inside, the scholar unfolds the parchment. The handwriting is small and neat, a familiar style. It is from his younger cousin, asking politely if the scholar might review a poem draft before the week's end. It's not urgent, just hopeful, a gesture of connection. He places the slip on the edge of his desk and sits once again. He will respond later, or perhaps invite the boy to return with a verbal answer. But for now, he simply breathes. The knock at the gate was not an interruption, not really. In a life like this, interruptions are soft and rare. They come like ripples on still water. They arrive, they pass, and the water smooths again. He glances down at his scroll. The characters are nearly dry. Their edges have softened into the fibers of the paper, settling like footprints into soil. He reaches for the cleanest corner and rolls it gently from one end, guiding the scroll into a tidy spiral. No creases, no rush. Then he ties it with a simple cord, places it inside a cloth wrapper, and sets it aside. Outside, life continues. A street hawker calls out in sing-song tones. A dog barks once and is silenced. Somewhere, the echo of another knock, not at his gate but someone else's, marks the shared rhythm of the city waking. Inside, the ink is still fragrant, and the brush, now rinsed, hangs quietly once again. The scroll has been set aside, the inkstone cleaned. The brush, after being rinsed in a shallow dish of rainwater, now hangs to dry, its tip reshaped with care. There's a sense of fullness in the air, not accomplishment but stillness. A calm that follows quiet effort. The sun has risen fully now, filtering down through the slatted roof of the courtyard. The plum blossom branch by the window casts a soft swaying shadow across the floor. The scholar steps outside, not far, just a few steps into the open courtyard at the center of the house. The tiles are warm beneath his feet. The air smells faintly of bamboo and damp stone. He does not speak. There is no one to speak to today. But even if someone were here, his words would be few. Meals, like writing, are a matter of simplicity, a matter of care. There is no feast prepared, no grand tray of delicacies. Just rice, always rice. He moves slowly toward the kitchen room, a half-open space sheltered by a tiled awning. The stove inside is small and old, made of clay and stone blackened from years of soft flame. He adds twigs from a basket, the sound of snapping wood crisp in the quiet. A flint spark, then fire, low and steady. A single clay pot rests on the stove. He lifts the lid and measures water by sight. No need for cups or markings. He's made this meal 1,000 times, maybe more. A handful of rice rinsed until the water runs clear. He pours it in and lowers the lid, then waits. Outside, the world hums but does not intrude. A sparrow flits between rooftops. Wind rustles the narrow leaves of a bamboo grove at the corner of the courtyard. Every sound is softened by distance and by time. Here, moments do not rush forward. They pass slowly, like ink soaking through thick paper. He squats beside the stove watching steam rise. When the pot hisses softly, he lifts the lid and stirs with a bamboo spoon. The scent is familiar, clean, and mild. There are no strong spices, no sweet oils. Just the gentle comfort of what the body needs. Enough to sustain, never more than that. He spoons the rice into a small bowl, lets it cool, then carries it to the same window where he sat earlier with his tea. There is no table set, no formality, just sunlight and space. The first mouthful is small. Warmth fills his mouth, then fades. He eats slowly, not because he is trying to be deliberate, but because there is no reason to rush. Each bite is part of the stillness, a moment to rest, to observe. He watches a group of ants weaving along a crack in the courtyard wall. One carries a piece of plum blossom petal, too large for its body but determined nonetheless. The scholar watches them longer than he realizes. Time, like everything else today, stretches without resistance. The meal is finished quietly, the bowl rinsed and set to dry. No ceremony, no excess. Back inside, the light has shifted again. Shadows fall at new angles. The inkstone is dry. The room is cooler than before. He returns to the writing mat and sits once more, not to work, but simply to be still, to let the body absorb rest as easily as it absorbed rice. Outside, the sun will rise higher, then fall. But within this small home, time has already slowed to something softer. There are no alarms, no lists, just silence, tea, and the faint fragrance of plum blossoms drifting in with the breeze. The afternoon light settles differently now, heavier, warmer, reaching across the floor in long rectangles. The scholar remains seated near his writing desk, his body calm, his gaze fixed on the scroll still resting at the edge. He has no appointments, no visitors planned, and yet the stillness has started to feel full again, like a bowl waiting for water. He turns his eyes toward the poem on the wall. It's been there for many years. A delicate brush rendering of a short verse by Wang Wei, mounted between wooden dowels and faded slightly at the edges. The silk backing has begun to wrinkle. Dust has settled faintly into the top corners, but the words remain intact. He doesn't need to read them anymore, they live inside him. Still today he will copy them again, not for memory, not to preserve them, simply to feel them through his own hand again. He retrieves a fresh piece of parchment, a little thicker, a little softer than what he used earlier, and sets it on the desk. The brush he selects is finer this time, narrower, more delicate, better for the soft precision that poetry demands. Once again, he begins the process, dips the brush into the dark ink, lets the excess fall back into the stone basin. Then, with a quiet exhale, he places the tip to paper. The first character is Kong, empty. The first word of the poem. He paints it slowly, drawing out each stroke as if it were a breath. Then another. The next line flows gently. Each word spaced with careful intent, each character slightly smaller than the last. He's not thinking of the reader, there is none. Only the poem, only the brush. Only this moment as he writes, he doesn't rush ahead in thought. He lets each character emerge as if for the first time. The meaning of the poem is simple. A reflection on a mountain path, quiet after rain and the sound of birdsong echoing in the emptiness. It is a poem about stillness, which means in a way it is a poem about his life. By the time he reaches the final line, his hand is steady, and the ink has thinned slightly from use. He allows it. It softens the closing characters, gives them a faded grace, as if the poem is dissolving as it's written. He leans back and studies the copy, not to critique it, but simply to witness it, to sit with it as a new thing. He lets the brush rest across the basin's edge and sets the fresh scroll beside him to dry. His gaze returns to the original. It's been with him through seasons, through grief, through joy, through years when he wrote every day, and years when the ink dried untouched. It has waited without complaint, just as the mountain in the poem waits, just as the path does, empty after footsteps fade. He rises slowly and begins to sweep the floor, not as a chore but as a pause between moments. The straw broom moves softly against the bamboo slats. It stirs a little dust into the late sunlight, and then clears it away. He doesn't need a clean floor, not in any urgent sense, but sweeping clears the air. It changes the sound of the room. It prepares it for whatever might come next, even if nothing does. When he finishes, he returns to the desk, rolls the copy of the poem with careful fingers and places it in a small cloth envelope. He does not label it. He does not plan to send it. He simply adds it to a wooden box beneath the writing table, among dozens of others. Poems copied, stories retold, passages preserved not for public eyes, but because copying them was an act of attention, an act of devotion. He closes the box gently. The lid makes a soft wooden thud. Outside, the wind shifts through the courtyard again. The poem on the wall moves ever so slightly, a breath, a flutter, like a curtain stirred by memory. And in the quiet that follows, the room feels whole once more. Afternoon fades, not with drama, but with softness. The sky, once bright, begins to pale toward silver. Shadows stretch farther across the floor. A hush settles into the corners of the room. Not silence exactly, but the sound of slowing things. A teacup placed gently back onto wood. The soft creak of the house adjusting its joints. The pages of a forgotten book shifting in a breeze. The scholar stands once more and walks barefoot to the sleeping mat he folded away that morning. It lies tucked in a narrow alcove beside the desk. He draws it out slowly and lays it across the floor, smoothing the edges. His knees lower first, then the rest of him follows, spine easing down until he lies flat, arms folded across his middle. He does not intend to sleep, not yet. This is rest in a quieter sense. Rest is stillness, not unconsciousness. A time when the body reclines but the mind wanders softly. Thought in this hour moves differently. Above him, the wooden beams stretch across the ceiling like lines on a page. He's looked at them for years. Their knots and curves are familiar, a secret language only he has read. One plank in particular reminds him of a river he once crossed as a boy, on a narrow bridge in late summer. The shape of the grain curves like that river just before the bend. He has not spoken to his brother in many seasons, distance mostly. A life of letters and ink does not lend itself to travel. He wonders if his brother remembers that river, or if it has vanished behind the noise of a busier life. His brother chose commerce wagons. Dust not profit, there is a certain motion to that path. And here there is a certain stillness. He traces the memory like a brush along silk. No friction, just a slow pull. He remembers his teacher too. A man whose breath always smelled faintly of medicine, and who corrected his early characters with a stern hand. But whose praise, and when it came, was so quiet, so rare that it still echoes. "This line lives," the teacher once said, pointing to a single phrase the scholar had written at age 16. He remembers nothing else about the essay, only that one moment. The idea that a line could live. His eyes begin to close, but not from tiredness, just from softness, the way eyelids lower when there is nothing left to look at. He lets them fall, lets the past drift through him, not like a storm, but like dust through a beam of fading light. The room darkens slightly, not all at once, just by degrees. The kind of darkness that takes its time. Outside, a bird calls once, a long note, then silence. Inside, the scholar breathes in, then out. His hand rests beside him, fingers twitching slightly in response to something unseen. A sound remembered, perhaps. A place long gone. The mat beneath him carries the faint scent of summer grass. He has had it for years. It once belonged to his father. Passed down not because it was valuable, but because it was used. Because it had already carried many hours of rest. It squeaks faintly as he shifts. In this moment, nothing needs doing. There is no plan, no next. Just the mat. Just the beams above. Just the scent of ink still lingering faintly in the room like the last note of a song long faded. If he dreams now, he will not chase the dream. He will observe it the way he observes ink, or silence, or the shape of his own breath. The mat is quiet beneath him. His back presses softly into its weave. The faint scent of woven straw rising with each breath. For a time he doesn't move, not from sleep, but from contentment. The stillness is full, not empty, but settled. Then slowly he sits up. Outside the sun has dropped low. The courtyard glows gold at the edges, and the shadows are long now, stretched like calligraphy marks across the tiles. The sky is not dark yet, but it's preparing to be. The light doesn't vanish in Tang Dynasty China. It exits gently like a guest who does not wish to disturb. The scholar walks once again to the stove, not for tea this time, but to heat water for a shallow wash. It's something he does each night, not as ritual exactly, but as punctuation. A small soft mark that signals the end of the day's sentence. He pours water into a ceramic basin and adds a few dried petals, not for perfume, but for memory. They're plum blossoms saved from an earlier season, brittle and curled. As they touch the warm water, they soften again briefly. Their scent is faint but familiar. With a cloth, he dips and wrings and then begins to wipe his face, his neck, his arms. The water is warm, not hot, not cold, it's the temperature of dusk. His eyes close for a moment as the cloth passes over them. Not from tiredness, from presence. He does not think of the day's words or their meaning, or whether the characters were pleasing. He does not worry over the scrolls in the box or the message from his cousin, or whether the ink was too light near the end. He simply wipes his skin clean and lets the water drip quietly back into the basin. In the courtyard, a lantern flickers to life. A neighbor's home, most likely. The glow orange and muted behind a slatted screen. He doesn't know their name, but he recognizes their habits. That lantern always appears just as the last birds settle down. He lights his own lamp a moment later. The wick catches with a flutter and then steadies. The glow is soft and enough to read by, but not harsh. He places the lamp at the edge of his desk and lowers the screen near the window. The room is no longer open to the sky. It has become a cocoon. There is no list of evening tasks, no final duties, just the quiet reshaping of the room for night. He folds his writing cloth, rinses his ink basin again, covers the unused parchment. The brush has already dried and stiff and ready for tomorrow. He sits beside the lamp and opens a thin book, not to study but to follow the rhythm of another's words. The pages are soft at the corners, turned by years of quiet hands. He reads slowly, not every line, sometimes just a single verse, then silence again. It is not the meaning he chases, but the feeling. A line about frost on stone. A line about the moon caught in a bowl of water. Each one like a pebble dropped into the quiet pond of his mind. Ripples, then stillness. He reads until the words blur, not from sleepiness, just from surrender. The kind of surrender that happens when the mind finally understands it, no longer needs to think. He closes the book. Outside, the lanterns glow more brightly now. Not because they've grown, but because the sky has given way. The dark has arrived without fanfare, the way it always does. He leans back and listens. The breeze has died down. The sparrows are quiet. Even the distant call of the noodle seller has faded. The world has tucked itself in. And here in this room, the ink has dried. The day has spoken, and nothing more is required. The lamp burns low now, not because the oil has run out, but because the flame understands its place in the dark. It flickers with humility, casting small shadows on the scrolls, on the brush stand, on the folds of the scholar's robe. He does not blow it out yet. There is a final thing he must do before rest, though it is not a task in the usual sense. It is more of a question. A quiet inquiry made nightly, never spoken aloud. He kneels before the small wooden altar in the corner of his room. It holds no statue, no offerings tonight, just a narrow incense tray, a stone bell, and a single dried lotus pod, objects chosen not for their beauty but for their silence. He does not pray in the formal sense. There are no chants, no bowed repetitions. Instead, he picks up the incense stick, places it into the holder, and lights it with a splinter from the oil lamp's flame. The incense curls upward like a ribbon of thought made visible. He watches it rise, watches it twist and vanish. The smell, sandalwood and faint ash, settles over the room like memory. And as the smoke drifts, so do his thoughts. He thinks not of events, but of balance. The balance between action and stillness. Between what was done and what was left undone. Between what he wrote and what remained inside. He does not judge his day. He does not chase it. He lets it recede like the tide. And in that retreat, he asks the question, the same one each night. Was I present, not productive? Not accomplished, just present? Did he feel the weight of the brush? Did he hear the sound of the tea rising in its bowl? Did he notice the shadow of the sparrow at noon? Did he allow the world to pass through him without turning away? He does not answer the question directly. It is not the kind that wants answering. It only wants asking. The incense continues to burn. He rises slowly and moves to extinguish the lamp. But then he pauses. The light is small. The room is safe. He decides to let it burn just a while longer. There is comfort in that glow, like a companion who doesn't speak but remains near. He prepares his mat again. This time not for rest or reflection, but for sleep. The act is the same, an unfolding, smoothing, placing the pillow at the proper corner. But the intent has shifted. He is not resting to think. He is surrendering to forgetting. The stars are not visible from his room. The screen is drawn, the windows covered. But he imagines them, small and cold and steady above the city, watching everything without preference. He lies down once more, pulling the thin blanket over his legs. The mat remembers him. molds to him, welcomes him. There is nothing left to say. Sleep does not arrive in this house with sudden weight. It drifts down, like ash from the incense stick, slow, gentle, inevitable. And as the scholar closes his eyes, his mind loosens its hold. The world tilts. The brush falls from his fingers in dream, if not in hand. He does not dream of palaces. He dreams of lines, of characters floating like leaves, of ink that never dries, of silence that speaks. And outside, the last curl of incense fades into the dark. Somewhere deep in the night, rain begins. Not a storm, not wind-lashed or heavy, just a soft silver tapping against the tiled roof. The kind of rain that doesn't announce itself but appears slowly, like dew that decided to arrive early. It falls in threads, in patterns too gentle to disturb even the lightest sleeper. Inside the room, the scholar sleeps. His breath is slow, deep. One hand rests over his chest. The other near his side, fingers curled inward as though still holding a brush in dream. His face is calm, not expressionless but unworried, as though whatever burdens the waking world might carry have politely stepped outside for the night. The lamp has burned down to its final flicker. It gutters once, twice, and goes out with a sigh. Darkness fills the room completely now. Not an empty darkness, but a quiet one. A woven shadow, stitched with memory and sleep. The rain continues. It taps against the edges of the courtyard, filters down through the bamboo, collects in the small basin near the stone steps. A single droplet strikes the lip of a clay pot and echoes like a bell made for dreams. No rhythm, just presence. Within sleep, the scholar does not stir, but some part of him listens. The body remains still, but the spirit drifts lightly through the room, touching the corners, tracing the beams, floating above the inkstone and the folded scrolls. He dreams, but the dream is not a story. It's a sensation, the feeling of wet earth, of brushstrokes written on water, of footsteps disappearing down a path he once walked as a boy, where rain turned the dust into silk beneath his feet. The rain thickens slightly, though it never grows loud. The roof sings in its own quiet voice, each tile joining in. The wooden walls creak now and then, not in protest but in conversation, as though welcoming the change in air. In the courtyard, puddles form slowly like ink pooling on paper. A single plum blossom leaf, long fallen, long forgotten, lifts and spins in a small circle, caught in a current made by nothing more than rain. The scholar turns in his sleep just slightly, a breath drawn deeper than the last, his brow smooth, his limbs heavy with peace. There is a serenity in this hour that day cannot match, not because the world is quieter, but because there is no one trying to speak over it. The city has given itself over to sleep, to restoration, to the small necessary death that night brings. Even the ants beneath the courtyard wall have retreated. The wind has softened to near stillness. All that remains is rain, and breath and time slowing, and still he does not wake. Not for the sound, not for the cold, not even for the quiet memory of the teacher who once said, "The rain writes in its own hand. All you must do is learn to read it." The scholar sleeps and the rain continues to write. This is the hour when the world forgets itself. Even the rain has softened to near silence. Not gone, but gentler now, as if it has remembered how light a touch is required. It no longer taps, it lingers. A faint hush, like the whisper of silk robes brushing a floor long swept. The scholar lies unmoving. This hour, the one between midnight and dawn, has no proper name. The old monks call it the hour of the ox. The poets call it the hollow time. But to the scholar, it has always been the hour of no sound. And in this hour, even dreams move more slowly. He does not dream of faces or voices. He dreams in textures and feelings. A stone warm from the sun. A window open just wide enough for spring air. A page turned before the words have settled. The weight of a brush in hand, though no stroke is needed. Somewhere inside that dream he is walking. Not through the luoyang he knows, but through a softer version of it. The streets are empty, the lanterns are still lit. The ink stalls are open but unmanned. He does not speak, he does not need to. His sandals make no sound on the stone. He pauses at a gate that resembles his own. Beyond it, a plum tree, blooming though it is not the season. The petals fall upward. The sky above is neither day nor night, only a soft expanse, the color of faded scroll paper. He reaches for the tree, but the moment shifts, fades, becomes something else. And just like that, the dream dissolves. Back in his room, the shadows have begun to change shape. Not quickly, but noticeably. The kind of shift that only happens after long stillness. The world, it seems, is starting to stir, but it hasn't decided to wake. A single drop of rain falls into the clay basin again, the same one as before. The sound is round, hollow, perfect, as though the night is placing a period at the end of an invisible sentence. The scholar breathes a deep, slow inhale, not waking and not yet, but a sign that waking is possible. The kind of breath the body takes when it has nothing left to hold on to, when it is ready to begin again, but only if asked gently. The incense ash has fallen in a long, curled strand. It rests at the base of the altar like a tiny question mark. Unanswered, unasked. Nothing moves yet. And in this pause, this weightless moment between night and morning, the scholar lies still beneath his blanket, breathing in a world that has momentarily forgotten what it means to move. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is the most restful moment of all. The air has changed. It is not brighter, not yet. But something in it has lightened, a shift so subtle that it is felt before it is seen. The breeze through the window is cooler. The silence is no longer heavy. It is expectant. The scholar's breath has deepened. His limbs, still draped in the blanket, shift slightly. One hand flexes. His eyes remain closed, but the muscles of his face soften. Not waking, not quite, but returning outside. The rain has stopped. The tiles of the courtyard roof glisten, catching the earliest blush of what will soon be sunlight. A plum blossom petal, one that somehow survived the night, rests delicately on the rim of the basin, its surface trembling from the weight of a single clear drop. The city beyond the scholar's walls has not yet found its voice. The vendors are still asleep. The monks have not rung their bells. Even the birds are hesitant. But the dark is lifting. The scholar stirs again, not with urgency. He does not sit up. Instead, he draws one leg in and presses his palm lightly to the mat beneath him, feeling its woven pattern with the tips of his fingers. A grounding gesture, a quiet return. His eyes open. They blink once, slowly, adjusting to the faint blue light now seeping through the edges of the window screen. He does not speak. He does not sigh. He simply looks. At the room, at the soft folds of his robe beside him, at the faint outline of the writing desk in the corner. Everything where it should be. He sits up, the blanket folding down around his waist. His back straightens. His hands rest on his knees. There is no yawn, no groan, no moment of disorientation. He does not need to remember where he is. He has always been here, and slowly, with a practiced ease, he rises. The mat is folded, the blanket hung. The room begins to breathe again with him. He moves to the small basin and pours the last of the water, now cool and still faintly scented, into his hands. He wipes his face, his neck, the back of his neck. The droplets cling to his skin for a moment, then vanish. Outside, the first bird sings, just one. A single note, clear and high. It doesn't repeat. It doesn't need to. It has opened the day. The scholar walks toward the stove. His hands, without thinking, begin to arrange the twigs, prepare the pot, measure the water. He has done this every morning for years, but this morning, like every other, still feels new. He lights the flame. It catches instantly. The faint smell of smoke rises again, pine and damp ash and warmth. The pot begins to hum, the water inside not yet boiling, just beginning to shift. And across the room, a single beam of sunlight slips through the slatted window. It lands not on the scholar's face, not on the stove, but on the scroll he wrote yesterday, still resting where he left it, half unfurled, the ink dry and soft, the strokes silent and sure. The light does not rush in. It finds its way, and so does he. The pot on the stove begins to whisper, not boil, just whisper, the sound of warmth rising. The scholar watches the steam curl upward, pale and wavering, like breath made visible. He lifts the lid briefly, stirs the water with a bamboo spoon, and then sets it to one side. He will return to it soon. For now he feels a different pull, not hunger, not thought. Movement. He slides the wooden door open with care. It resists slightly, swollen from the night's rain, but gives way without protest. The courtyard greets him with a hush. Everything is wet. Every tile, every leaf, every stone carries a sheen. The rain has not left. It has become the air itself. He steps outside barefoot. The coolness of the stone cuts briefly through him, waking his soles. But he does not recoil. He moves slowly, deliberately, letting his feet find their place without rush. Above him, the sky is a soft, even gray, neither threatening more rain nor promising sun. Just present, the kind of sky that does not draw attention to itself. The plum tree at the courtyard center has dropped a dozen more blossoms. Their petals lie scattered like pale brushstrokes across the dark, wet stone. He walks to it, places his hand gently on the trunk. The bark is damp, almost slick. He does not shake it. He does not disturb the petals that remain. He only listens. Water drips steadily from the edges of the roof. Not in torrents, but in rhythm. Each drop finding a different note as it lands, on tile, on wood, on earth. He walks once around the courtyard. It is a small loop, perhaps 20 steps. But in those 20 steps he sees what rain has revealed. Moss brighter than the day before. A crack in a tile that deepened. A snail making its way toward the garden wall. These are not discoveries, they are reminders that the world changes even when it does not try. He reaches the far end of the courtyard and pauses. Beyond the wall, the faintest sounds of life have returned. A cartwheel turning, a ladle striking a pot, a child's call quickly hushed. The city is waking now. But within these walls, time remains slow. He lowers himself onto the courtyard bench, a simple stone slab, cold from the rain but dry on its top surface. He folds his robe beneath him and sits in stillness. Hands in his lap, eyes on the garden path. A small sparrow hops down from the plum tree, eyes the wet ground, then flies off again. Its wings flick water into the air. The droplets catch what little light exists and vanish before touching down. He smiles, just barely. This is not a moment meant to be captured. It is a moment meant to pass. He sits a while longer, not thinking, not remembering, not planning. Simply sitting, being sat, letting the morning complete its own slow turn. Then when the coolness has begun to climb into his legs, he stands once more. The walk is complete, no destination. No achievement, just 20 steps and a pause. Back inside, the pot is beginning to steam in earnest. He returns to it, pours the water over a small scoop of green tea leaves in a shallow cup, and watches as they unfurl. They twist, they soften, they release their scent, bitter, clean, familiar. The scholar lifts the cup and drinks. The tea is warm in his hand. The scent rises slowly, not sharp like morning citrus, not rich like spiced broth. Just green, just clean. The taste of leaves and water and waiting. He sips it, eyes half lowered, watching the steam dance above the cup's surface like thin calligraphy strokes trying to become meaning. He places the cup down with a soft sound, porcelain against wood, and breathes once through his nose. And then he feels it. Not a push, not even a pull, but a nudge. A shift, a quiet suggestion from somewhere beneath the morning. It is not a thought, not yet a phrase, just the sense that something wants to be written. He turns slightly, reaching toward his desk. No hesitation, no plan. He does not select the finest brush. He does not grind fresh ink. He chooses the tools still laid out from yesterday. The same basin, the same brush, now dry and familiar from use. The water in the inkstone has settled. He stirs it gently with the brush's tip, reviving what remains. Then he lowers the parchment. It is a smaller sheet. Not one for long form, not a scroll, just a single page. The kind he uses when a phrase arrives quietly, unsure of itself. He does not begin at the top. His hand moves halfway down the page before pressing the brush to paper, as if the words have already started somewhere else and he is only now catching up. The first character appears. It is not perfect. The top stroke wavers, but he does not correct it. He moves on. Another character, then another, and then a space. A pause, not from uncertainty, but from respect. The ink pools slightly in one corner. He continues, his breath matching the rhythm of the strokes. Not deep, not shallow. The kind of breathing that happens when the self steps aside and only the hand remains. He is not writing a poem exactly, not yet. But the lines know how to shape themselves. One about the color of rain on old stone. One about the silence between two birdsong notes. One about a cup left warm by a hand now gone. Each line floats apart untethered. No structure, just offerings. He pauses, the room holds still around him. The tea has cooled. The brush is nearly dry. He adds one more stroke, a single curved mark that trails off at the end. Not unfinished, but open. As if the sentence knows it must never fully end. Then he sets the brush down. The page is not full, and it never will be. It is not meant to be complete, just true. He lifts the parchment gently and holds it to the light, tilting it slightly to watch how the wet ink catches the morning. He does not read what he wrote. Not yet, maybe not ever. The writing was the point, not the reading. He places the page aside to dry where it will remain for now, until the day grows old enough to let it go. Then with a final sip of cold tea, he lets the morning pass on without him, satisfied not with what was captured, but with what was allowed. The light has fully entered the room now. It spills across the desk, warming the grain of the wood, softening the folds of parchment, glinting faintly off the edge of the ink basin. The day is no longer beginning. It simply is, and still full and gently humming with quiet life. The scholar stands once more. There is nothing pressing, no guest expected, no letter due, no ceremony to prepare. But even on days when he is entirely alone, the rhythm remains. It is not habit in the shallow sense, not mindless motion, but a form of reverence. Each act repeated for decades is both new and ancient. A brush dipped, a mat folded, a pot cleaned. He moves through his home not as a man seeking something, but as one who has already found it. The broom leans in its usual place near the doorway. He lifts it, runs it gently along the courtyard stone. Each stroke clears small debris. Fallen petals, specks of dust, one dry leaf curled at the edge. None of it needs urgent removal. But the act is not about urgency. It's about care, about tending, about treating space, even small space, as something worthy of attention. As he sweeps, a thought returns to him. Not loudly, not suddenly. Just the echo of a phrase his teacher once spoke. To do the same thing again and again and again and find it new each time. That is the root of all peace. He did not understand it when he first heard it. He was young then, impatient, longed for variety, for inspiration, for the lightning strike of genius. But now the lightning seems less important. Now it is the steady lantern flame that comforts him, the repetition, the quiet sameness, not out of boredom but out of depth, a depth that only becomes visible after years of looking at the same stone, the same shadow, the same scroll. He returns the broom to its place and steps inside. The parchment he wrote on earlier has dried. He lifts it, reads the lines for the first time. They are imperfect, a smudge on the third character, a wavering at the end, but they are honest. And in honesty he finds beauty. He does not hang it, does not frame it, just rolls it gently and tucks it into the box with the others. The box that is never opened for guests, never catalogued, never labeled, a box of moments, nothing more. He pours himself another cup of tea. The water is cooler now, the leaves less fragrant, but the cup still warms his hands. He drinks it slowly, lets it linger. Outside, the birds have returned. 2 sparrows on the edge of the basin. One drinks, the other watches, and he watches both. Then he smiles, and the faintest shift at the corners of his mouth. It's not joy exactly, it's recognition that this moment, like yesterday's and likely tomorrow's, will pass without record. That nothing astonishing will happen today, that no name will be added to history, that no visitor will knock, that no prize will arrive. And still he is content, not because he lacks ambition, but because he no longer needs ambition to feel awake, because he has learned that peace is not a thing to be won. It is a practice, a quiet, daily returning, 1,000 mornings all the same and yet somehow always different. And as he places the empty cup back onto the wooden table, the room around him breathes, full of quiet things, tended things, soft and sacred in their simplicity. And so, the day has passed, as so many did in the Tang Dynasty, with ink drying quietly, rain washing the stone paths, and a scholar living not for history, but for presence. No great conflict, no grand reward, just tea, just scrolls, just soft routines that deepened over decades. In a world that often rushes toward more noise, more fame, more urgency, this life reminds us that repetition can be a sanctuary. That peace is not a moment we find. It's something we return to, brushstroke by brushstroke, breath by breath. Over the last 2 hours, you've wandered gently through silence, stone courtyards, warm tea, soft rain, and thoughts too quiet to be spoken. The kind of thoughts that only arrive when the world stops asking for anything from you. And now it's time to let go, to let sleep arrive slowly, to allow the quiet you've been listening to continue long after this voice fades. If this story kept you company tonight, you're welcome to return to it anytime you need stillness. And if you haven't already, take a moment, sometime soon, to gently subscribe to this channel. It helps bring more calm, more quiet, and more boring history for sleep into your world. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. It's oddly satisfying to see who else is falling asleep to the past. For now, close your eyes a little deeper, let the ink dry, and rest. Good night.